Very well liked. He was a real gentleman. He was just a delightful person.
His letters sort of prove that, because when he would talk shop, he always had a paragraph in his letter that said, "Oh, and how is your family? Oh, I hope you have a nice holiday. Oh, I hope everything." You know, he always kind of concluded with something, kind. I also heard he was an extreme professional perfectionist. It was often said that he said, "Never say it's good enough. It has to be perfect." And that probably comes from his background on being a public sculptor. So you have to work with other people who may not have an art background. So you have to be really, really on your toes and perfect when you're doing things like that. It could never be just good enough. And I think it's a good thing to have, especially when you're producing things for someone. You have to understand that he was an artist that was an artist for hire to produce what the client wanted, not a fine artist in a sense in that way. So whoever hired him told him exactly what they wanted, and then sometimes he had a little bit of freedom. Like, for example, they would say, "Oh, we would like Christ and 2 children," or they might say, "Well, we would like a war memorial." And so sometimes he had that freedom to do whatever. So many different organizations or places or people hired him to do all of the sculptures that you see in the main gallery. So that's why you see all these different kinds of themes, like, for example, the kid-friendly themes, or the mythology themes, or the literary themes, or the history themes, or the animal themes, and so forth. I mean, you could honestly look at his work and say, well, there's a lot of animals, especially birds. Well, we happen to live in Michigan. Of course, you see these birds all year round in Michigan. You don't see them all year round in other states. So that sometimes does affect, what he produces.
He was able to modify it and modernize it in such a way that anyone could understand what he was doing, so that they would be open to everybody.
And in a way, you can connect him to history. For example, the little lion and mouse sculpture, the kid-friendly piece, And then he also had the 64, Freedom of the Human Spirit, as how we can connect to history, how we connect to math with the sizing, the different scale sizes that he does, and using a pantograph machine. How he connects to ELA, which is English Language Arts, with, Don Quixote, the Aesop fable, Lion and the Mouse, the Ugly Duckling, and different stories, the Boy and the Bear. And then you have science as well. When we discuss the casting process, which is a major part of when we tour K-12 schools here in this museum, that whole science, that process is all science.
He tried to carry out traditional sculptural techniques and traditional ways of working three-dimensionally.
His style would have to be, well, first of all, we know he's traditional figurative. We look at his work, we understand it, we read it very simply. People, animals, a lot of symbolism in many cases in some of his work. If I'm going to connect him to a movement in art history, it has to be Art Deco. And that's characterized by streamlining, simplification of form. If you notice, when you're looking at the Christ, and you look in the face of the Christ, you'll see a little bit of geometric, stylization, which kind of relates to Cubism in a way. And there are a few other smaller pieces that have this little bit of a geometric styling and design. But I think he was just a spiritual person, and I'm saying that in a non-religious sense as well. I think he had a good deal of respect for all people, and I think he also was multicultural in a way, because there's a case in the back and it has portraits that he sculpted. Well, I think he found it very fascinating, the different features of the different cultures. You'll see just about a lot of cultures represented in his art. He likes to be inclusive of all people. Today in our culture, it's a very strong thing, and it's really a good thing. And back then, it was leading towards that way, but not that way yet. And yet, he was that way even before, so he was kind of ahead of his time. Well, I'd say he's a gentleman, and if you hired him to have a piece of artwork done, you were going to get the best, and you would put lot of time and effort into it. I would say that you would, whenever you got your work, it would be the best. And it would absolutely be perfect. He's very, very kind and gentlemanly to deal with as a person, and a lot of people that knew him, I meet them all the time, and they just absolutely loved him and adored him. People just spoke very highly of him. His children all speak highly of him and miss him. You know, we always think of him as a Michigan artist, but he really is an American artist, an American sculptor.
I think all of us who have worked with him were happy to have had that experience. We miss his visits. He was very good at producing work that people could enjoy, that people were able to enjoy at a time when abstract art was difficult for most people.